Welcome guests and everyone to the first Brown Bag presentation of fall 2021. I'm Sandra Charletta. I'm the Assistant Administrative Director for CM2. We have, as usual, several informal Brown Bag discussions with CM2 researchers and students to highlight their ongoing activities and what the Research Center is doing. So we are very excited to have two guest speakers, two researchers from University of Texas at Austin. So first, we're going to have a really great retrospective discussion on the exhibit Other Nature with Associate Professor Danelle Briscoe. That'll be a 20-minute presentation with about a 10-minute Q&A afterwards for anybody to ask questions. You're welcome to, just speak up, or if you prefer to have a question in the chat, we can share that way. And then after Danelle's presentation, we will have Professor Fang Zhao, who will be sharing, he just recently had his book published, Shared Mobility. This is a title that he has worked with in conjunction with CM2. So we're very excited to have this book out, and we are really excited to be able to hear Dr. Zhao's insights on developing the book and what it's about itself. So without further ado, I would like to be able to start the presentation. Associate Professor Danelle Briscoe, we're very excited to hear about your retrospective viewpoint on the exhibit Other Nature. So I'll go ahead and stop share now, and you can begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandra, for this invitation and opportunity to speak today, and also just for giving me an opportunity to speak about the exhibition in general. I realized as I was putting it together that I, in fact, didn't have a chance to share my thoughts as originally planned. I think, like most of us in the school, many things changed with the pandemic, and this was indeed one of them for me. I had intended to have the symposium the week after spring break that year. And so everything had been printed, everyone had been invited, it was in full force. And then as we know, things changed. But because I had already printed everything, Leora Visovsky and I had done so much work to pull something together, I just thought, why not present it in the school anyway, and give the faculty, especially the students and others that just passed through, the opportunity to maybe see what would have been a symposium and then an accompanying exhibition. So it's been interesting for me the last couple of days to sort of pull together a presentation to talk about it. So it's not so much a retrospective of the entire exhibit. It's more of a little bit of my background as to why I was invited to be a part of the CM2 group, and then how my research has developed along the lines of information modeling and its influence on design, and the scalability of that, and then coinciding with how living systems or biophilic approaches in architecture and infrastructure, and particularly transportation, have become somewhat of a focus in that breadth of work as well. So can you see my screen, I hope? Is that all clear? Okay. So when I was initially invited to become a part of this consortium of CM2, it was because of my research with BIM as a data-rich digital representation of physical and functional characteristics of facilities, and looking particularly with this group at the network hubs, the transportation hubs that are hopefully becoming a part of what we do to help our mega regions for mobility. And so innovations through multimodal planning and modeling for high growth regions was a particular topic that the overall research group was interested in, and how I came about. And my own research from my book, really wants to conflate the spaces of GIS and BIM. So not just thinking about all the componentry and the facilities that BIM might facilitate in coordinating and I guess designing, but thinking about the implications and the impacts that go all the way back to that global perspective. So that was something that I really touched upon with my earlier research in 2015. And then I find it interesting that the origins of BIM, the information modeling, the data-rich componentry that is such of that research was really developed through the transportation discipline and its departments and its development through the aerospace industry and then later automotive industries. And so through CATIA, I see as pre-BIM. And so I'm interested in that it's kind of gone full circle back to the transportation typology, and that we're actually seeing transportation industry rely on its coordination and accuracy, like the retrofitting and network optimization that went on for the Victoria line in London. I looked at that quite closely for a while. And then my own sort of, traveling and wandering has led me to the biophilic approaches that have been taken in transportation infrastructure. One of the notable trips that I took through fellowships were to Vancouver and looking at some of the highway infrastructure that was really pushing this approach of including nature, including living systems in anything that they did of this scale. And then I also had the good fortune to go to Japan and look at the history of infrastructure mixed with nature, and their BioLung pavilion that happened in the 2005 World Expo was really one that I felt was noteworthy and really got me thinking about the scale of a living wall and how infrastructure, particularly to do with transportation, would be something that I would focus on. This is now a disassembled project, and I spent many hours in the libraries there looking at all the information that they had on file, which isn't available to us actually in through Google or the US. So that was part of an early investigation. And really through the Snell Endowment prior to the CM2, I was looking at this sort of relationship of heat island situations that were happening in Tokyo, especially focusing on the intensity of transportation, multimodal transportation systems that they have there. They actually have a set of guidelines that were developed in 2005, which actually coincided with the BioLung introduction at that pavilion, that the Tokyo metropolitan government was trying to push any kind of biophilic approach, particularly to do with transportation. So I have done a case study and written a few articles on the relationships of what approaches were taken and comparing those things. And so this influenced, I would say, how I began thinking about my position with the CM2 consortium and how I would approach the template, the revamping of a BIM template as a way of developing or innovating ways that we think about BIM for transportation. And I just really have been collecting open source and creating customized objects, ones that you can imagine and ones that you maybe are, beyond what we normally see. This is that image that I presented at a brown bag, I think 2 or 3 years ago, which is now the sort of backdrop for the group, which I'm very happy to see. But it was really more so collecting all the transportation network objects. And so thinking of object modeling in a very different way. And I've written about that, but providing the kind of development to connect any sort of practical actions and thinking about the parametricism of all these objects and their actions in a system of user scenarios. And so that was earlier on. And then I also presented some work at ITED in Washington that talked about advancing the BIM modeling techniques beyond that fourth dimension. I think that's really where a lot of I would say direction or advanced direction takes with BIM. And so not just the time-based assemblies for transfer nodes, but thinking about cost implications and schedule of multimodal timetables and so on and so forth, maybe even a seventh dimension to do with operational control. So maintenance could mean something for public transportation and how that gets embedded into a BIM model or a BIM network. And then I've also got this whole biophilic approach that I'm interested in with architecture and how we can integrate natural systems and nature in general into what we do with our built environment. So it really blows the fourth dimension out of the water, because you're not just talking about time of a transportation network, you're talking about time of how long it will take the plants to grow. And so all of those 5, 6, and 7th dimensions really change when you add in this other component to it. But either way, I've been trying to see how we can not only focus on a multimodal network, but less of a collection of these discrete things, less of sort of separation and more of something that brings them together in a mingling scenario, and that gives socialization not just to discrete objects or discrete systems, but that would encourage a kind of socialization and social equity that we're pursuing. And layered on top of that is that aspect of nature, and including nature with everything that we consider. So everything is, of course, about the efficiency and the planning that the CRP group do so well, but that within those things, those objects that are necessary to make the systems happen, that we consider how we can add an entire layer of what might help us with heat island effect or any other sort of mitigation. And so some of the work that I've done with students as well, I would say really pursued a kind of collision of hierarchies or challenged that within a BIM model. This was one of the kind of conceptual gestural drawings that a student did for a studio in the spring of 2019, and to be thinking about design perceptions, but using sort of global issues at hand and local circumstances that might affect what a hub might be and the design of that. So thinking critically about those 4, 5, and 6 dimensions that we oftentimes don't get to play around with much. And this was for a studio project that was meant to be designing that rail system and potentially looking at the urban context in downtown Dallas of that high-speed rail station there. That is supposed to be a project someday, hopefully. And my own research with CM2 at the time was looking at how we might consider the commuter, for example, as a kind of urban workplace that can hold data, but might be sort of teasing out other aspects of BIM that aren't normally considered, like what happens when we put a green roof on a bus, or then we have places to sit that actually produce energy or give back something to a commuter and the community that it might be trying to help. And so these were some of the components or objects, as you will, of things that I was custom designing, and also sort of looking at the scheduling of in terms of the dimension of energy output and how a user might be engaged in part of that process. This was a pedal charger for a phone zone. and then things that could happen along, say, a transportation network where wind turbines create a system of charge for electricity, and that we start to document that or schedule it within our BIM model. And so we're getting a sort of feedback loop of if placing 14 of these wind turbines, what sort of power do we get from them as automobiles or trucks drive by, and what sort of efficiency might that be? And so that was sort of a way for us to test, if you will, some of the componentry that was customized, and look at how we can further develop the dimensions beyond the fourth. And at the same time, I've got my pilot project going on that was started in 2015. The research for that actually started in 2010, working with Mark Simmons at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and really trying to understand what a living wall system would mean for a climate like Austin that is hot and arid, and particularly challenging on a west facade. And so this entire project and research group was developed to have a system or make a study and a proposal for the west facade of the Guadalupe Garage on the UT campus. And so it was, again, thinking about how we can make a transportation infrastructure element that we know so well. The parking garage in Texas is, something that is so common we don't even think about it anymore. But to really treat that like an ecological incubator rather than just a closet for cars all day long was something that was really the important aspect of it. And so in order to really fully understand the proposal, to really understand the implications of the plant list and the cell design, it was necessary to do this pilot project, which is on the west facade of Goldsmith Hall still. And this is just cantilevered out of the ground. It's not touching Goldsmith Hall. And so we're really had to think conservatively about how this would be structured in that particular instance. But going back to the information model, it was something that was heavily or primarily used in order to have conversations with stakeholders and the maintenance crews and all of the people that would be involved in the larger context of the Guadalupe Garage. And so we did quite a bit of study and a lot of discussion back and forth in terms of scheduling and all of those aspects that BIM does well, but also have embedded a whole system of monitorization and trying to establish, what sort of quantification can happen when we do put certain plants in, and we expect ecology to happen. So there has been a bit of monitoring since 2015 when the installation actually happened. But to get to the other nature, to get to potentially what my talk is meant to be about, was really something that came out of the Meadows Fellow that I received through the Center of American Architecture and Design. And through that work, I was able to study further some of the biophilic and transportation-based approaches to living systems that were happening in Japan. And so one of my images from that trip is in the exhibit. And that was really my contribution to the exhibit, besides curating and creating the symposium for it. But I wanted to really, in the exhibit, show a variety of scales, a variety of typologies, and certain proximities to transportation hubs, and that we can be thinking about such techniques almost across the board, that it's not limited to just retail, high-end interior spaces, but we really should be thinking about it with almost every blank surface that we have. And again, this can be something that affects the broadest design work or regional design work that planners do, down to the most intimate and furniture-like aspects that some of our interiors might try to accomplish. So alongside the integrated flora and use of technological approaches, I was also strongly considering through my research with the living wall system that we pursue architecture that gives support to the other, that supports butterflies and bugs and birds, and that demonstrates nature as a precedent. And so design projects like this one that I really appreciate by Nendo is a bird apartment that supports this form of other, which I came to define as design that is more than human inhabitation, that thinks beyond ourselves, and that includes all that is ecological. And so a bird facility like this is within the Ando Momofuku Center and is really devoted to promoting and increasing just that I said.
Just to let
I
you,
also,
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. We're at the 20-minute mark. So just to let you know.
oh, okay. Okay, then I will rush through some other examples. So
You-
another,
You don't. I have a shorter presentation, please. Daniel,
okay,
please.
well,
Q&A is flexible, so.
okay. Okay. So another example, sorry, I knew this was going to happen, Sandra, was the Danzy Blood parking structure, which is very local to us that you probably have passed by many times, but is a building that I think really elevates a mundane building type like a parking structure. Another project that was shown and actually a lecture coincided with this exhibit piece was by Claudia Pasquero of Ecologic Studio, and their work actually looks more broadly at sort of a planning approach that can be driven through algorithms that are done by bacteria and other very moss-like things. So an urban network that might typically take hundreds of years to develop happens quite quickly in their computational system. And so their work is being shown. I also showed the work of Ecologico Sistema. This was a project done in Madrid in 2004 that is a really interesting ecological boulevard and a space for social and bioclimatic public spaces. And then there was my insertion of a living wall in the exhibit that was part of the one side of the Tokyo station. And it is this double height ramping system. It's got living systems down at the bike stations, the bike storage areas, the stairs that cascade up to an upper deck level has this living wall system. And I have spent a day talking with the woman who maintains this, and it's really sort of a garden for her that she cares for meticulously. And so when you go up to this elevated zone of the Tokyo station, you're also filled with a living wall scape that gives respite from the pollution below and the noise below, and people not only pass by it to get to their train, stop or bus stop or bike, but to also just sort of sit. I mean, spending a lot of time in one place, you realize that people actually just go there, I think, to somewhat enjoy a place that has nature in it in a very congested area of Tokyo. I learned a lot by poking around and talking to the maintenance crew and how things are integrated, what sort of components they use, how it's run technologically, and found that even, people like not just myself, but others ask them questions quite a bit. And so this is my last slide, but this is sort of one of the areas that I feel has just a wonderful take on how we can include other nature in our built environment, and especially in transportation systems. So that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we do have about like 5 minutes then to take any questions that might be coming through regarding the presentation. I know I actually have a question. It's always really interesting to see what new architecture and how it's integrating the opportunity for, I've never actually even heard the term biophilic architecture, so now I have something new to look up today. But having that, integrating green space essentially in architecture, but there's such a lack of retrofitting for green spaces in older buildings or older areas or certain cities. So, I mean, I'm sure looking towards the future, that would be hopefully a change of the case. But do you have any thoughts or feedback on that concept of retrofitting some of our older spaces?
Well, I think it's a terrific idea, and I oftentimes wonder why we're not filling in or retrofitting aspects of nature more often into our existing contexts or conditions that need a bit of care and attention. And I feel like it is becoming a more accepted approach. So we're going to be seeing more of it, because as soon as you have an example to sort of guide an interested developer or party, you have something to look to say it can work and it provides this benefit. It's a risk, and I think that that's where, it's oftentimes the first thing that will go from some sort of budget engineered project, and it's a shame that it's not given the priority I think that it deserves when we're looking at climate change and how we have to always be in consideration of what we need to do to mitigate that. So I agree with you that it's a place that should be directed in this way, and I hope to see it going that way in the future.
Great, thank you. We have a question in our chat. It's actually from Dr. Shara. Thank you so much for joining today. Separate from the cut and cover proposals, what would your grandest vision be for I-35 through downtown and central Austin?
It's so funny you asked that. I actually did a project of I-35 and the walls that have gone up on MOPAC, to just pack those with living wall systems. Well, the MOPAC was because I watched those walls go up painfully, with no consideration for plant life or anything other than noise mitigation potentially. But I could see, like the proposals that have been done for I-35, that it would transform the city to just bury that, like what they've done in Boston. I think that it would make our city such a more manageable place, and that not only burying the highway corridor, which is so congested and such a frightening artery, that the buildings to the edges of it need to address that a park system isn't necessarily just going to be bounded by a park. We can't just insert Central Park into our landscape if that were to be afforded. But I think that the buildings that are going up now around it are also just as guilty of a hard-edged situation that is creating more heat conditions for their orientation. So I would say that, yes, context sensitive design, I like that term. So I would say that not only the bearing of I-35, but that every high rise from now on, maybe not high rise, but mid rise would also benefit by considerations along those lines, especially after I think really researching what has been done in Tokyo, the guidelines for heat mitigation that were put in place in 2005, I think have had an effect, and there's been response to that. And I really wish that we could have something along the similar lines in Austin. I see Dean Addington's hand up.
Yeah, this was a fascinating talk, and now I also understand why you and Fang were paired, because I think there's going to be something very provocative that'll come out of this. But one of the things I was thinking about and was intrigued by, particularly on your, multi-dimensional expansion of BIM, is that I think that one of the issues that we have is that we tend to still make it about the object of interest, the stable ground, and that stable ground might be a building. That stable ground might be a city, but we tend to define what that object of interest is. And so, you know, we keep trying to bring more and more and more into that without ever sort of questioning the nature of stable ground. And, you know, as I was looking at some of your exploratory transportation scenarios, one of the sort of beautiful things that was emerging for me was the thought that stable ground, or the object of interest, was actually the thing that could be the fleeting thing, you know, the thing that was instead inserted as a scenario as opposed to the object of interest. I mean, certainly for our energy analyses, we over depend upon input-output models, black box models, but basically conservative input-output models. And we do that for so many different things. But the thought that the thing of interest actually becomes the insertion or the scenario, which means that the sort of idea of the multiple dimensions is actually also beginning to think about different ways of slicing through that in order to sort of like say what it is that we're examining. And, you know, transportation is one of those things that's always pushed against the idea of stable ground. If stable ground is a building or a neighborhood or a city, transportation and the future of transportation or the past of transportation was the one thing that didn't fit within that. And I think it sort of really pushes to the foreground ways that we have to sort of rethink how we sort of address these different scenarios in their insertion. I'm actually really fascinated by this. So this is a longer conversation, but it's something that came to me while I was listening to you talk, that there's some real potential here.
Great. I'm really pleased you were able to come. It means a lot to me. I don't think there was a question in there, right?
I think the question is like, yeah, and it's
no, you don't have to ask a question. I just was making sure.
There's a bigger question, and we're talking about also changing our entire field, you know, and in terms of how we analyze and how we model, and how we test and how we examine, and even sort of figuring out who we need at the table to start to do that. So that's a big, long question for us to talk about, but yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I think that's what's been exciting for me, to be outside of the architecture discipline in a way that I'm not, you know, just trying to define what the best transportation hub might look like, but that I'm actually thinking more about the relationships of many other things outside of our discipline, which have an influence and an impact on what I do or what my discipline does. So it's been refreshing that I have been stepping outside maybe my comfort zone with this modeling platform.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Danelle, for your time and your presentation. We really appreciated it. If there are still any other questions, you can share in the chat. But I know, Danelle, you did mention that you had a time conflict possibly for 2 o'clock. So if you do need to leave as we move forward, that's totally fine. But I'd like to go ahead and transition to our second guest speaker. It is Dr. Fang Zhao, who recently published the book Shared Mobility. He has given credit to CM2 as part of Shared Mobility. So we are very excited and pleased and happy and really want to promote this title. It's a nice feather in the cap for CM2. And Dr. Zhao has just contributed so much to our research. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Zhao. Please go ahead and begin your presentation.
Oh, thank you so much for the nice introduction, Sandra. It's my pleasure to present my research. Let me share the screen. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining this seminar. So today is a great opportunity to present one of my book the only book I published so far, not one of. It's called Shared Mobility. The reason I decided to write a book on shared mobility is because in the early 2000, in this turning century, basically some researchers argue there's three major revolutions in transportation industry. The first is the shared mobility. The second is the autonomous driving vehicle. The third one is electrified vehicle. So that's according to research in California, University of California system. So I became very interested in the shared mobility and the shared economy topic. So the thanks for CM2 support during the last 4 years, I get an opportunity to research and to study different shared mobility form from transportation network company, which is Uber and Lyft, to bike share, to e-scooter, to car sharing. I basically examined all type of shared mobility format or mode we call in the current transportation world. So this is the content of this book. So this book was published by Elsewhere this year. It includes 8 different chapters. The first one is the history and evolution of shared mobility. The second one is a basic theoretical discussion why and what technology support us to use shared mobility. And in the third chapter, we go to the high level. We started the 2017 National Health Travel Survey. We're trying to understand on national level how the shared mobility affects transportation. And in the following chapter, we talk about the relationship between shared mobility and the public transit. Then we talk about Uber and the Lyft. Then we talk about shared bike. Then we talk about the rise and the future of e-scooters. In the last chapter, we just conclude with some discussions. This is the structure of this book. In this presentation, I will use a little different format. I will focus on a couple chapters and zip through other chapters. So the first chapter, the history and the evolution of shared mobility. So basically, shared mobility is defined as shared use of vehicle and bicycle and other transportation mode as expanding the sector of a shared economy. So basically, we all know shared economy. The power of shared economy and shared mobility is unlock unused or underused resources to other people. I'm neutral on shared mobility and shared economy, but this is economic theory behind all these activities. Economists argue because we allow to share and technology allow to share, so we can unlock some unused resources like a bedroom or seat in my car to other users, which I to a certain degree agree. That's why the shared economy exists. Shared mobility can provide great access to transportation, yes, and also prove to be beneficial to our community, to certain community. We will talk about this later. So basically, shared mobility also creates a lot of job opportunities and transportation mobility opportunities. So we'll go through this. So after talk about the economic theory, we want to talk about the technology support behind the shared economy and shared mobility. I want to say specific shared mobility. The reason why shared mobility exists is because I think a major revolution in communication technology which is a location-based service. Everybody now have a cell phone. So because we have a cell phone, we can know your location at a given time and given space. So that allows us to access a network of a shared mobility network. So let me ask you a question. So do you know how many ways we can locate your position just using cell phone? There's, to save time, I will set out at least 4 ways. So cell phone signal, we can use cell phone signal, triangulate your position, GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. So that enable us to locate your position. So basically that enable us to access different shared mobility mode. This is when we use a cell phone to detect your movement. So this is accuracy of a different movement, walking, biking, car, bus, and metro, just FYI. So when we use metro and bus, cell phone signal can detect your position very, very precisely. And we got a lot of errors when you're walking or bike. So actually cell phone signal and a GPS and also cell phone are not so good to locate you in time and space when you work and bike. Anyway, that's the technical support for shared mobility. Use this, we can use a general location-based service. This allow us to open the door to a network of shared mobility. So basically, I talk about the economic theory and technology support why shared mobility exists. So now we have both theory support and we have technology support, and a lot of companies start to provide service in this universe. Okay, we already talked about this. So basically, shared mobility relate to shared economy. This provide a lot of benefit to society. The first one, cost benefit. The second one, sustainability. The third one is convenience and transit equity. That's the benefit of shared mobility and shared economy. We also have some limitations of a shared economy and a shared mobility. First, if you are low income or age over 65 or without high school diploma or living in a low income area, you really have a hard time to access the network of shared mobility. This is well proved by many researchers. Also, if you're trying to use shared mobility, go outside of a metropolitan area, such as the rural area or less developed areas, also you will run into trouble. So this is a limitation of shared mobility. Another, limitation is the shared mobility, especially for ride sourcing companies. They won't provide a service or only provide limited service to low density and less developed areas. That's because their model is for profit. So last thing, when we use shared mobility and the shared economy overall, we will have a conflict with a social well-being to a certain degree. This is as I said, I'm neutral in this shared mobility world, but I do see a lot of shared mobility company pose problem for the community. Basically, I give you an example. They use the road without paid maintenance to the road. They use the parking space without maintenance to the parking space. So basically, that will be a problem, and that's up to for policymakers to debate and how to regulate that. So that's my observation. So at a national level, how people use shared mobility. We specifically investigate the triple rate per person because the triple rate useful travel demand planning metrics and a proxy for travel demand. This is basically, this study was the first one to examine the association between shared mobility service usage and trip generation activities. We basically investigated 3 variables like bike sharing, car sharing, and ride hailing apps usage. We find only ride hailing app usage has a statistically significant effect on the number of trips people take. So this is ride hailing is basically Uber and Lyft. So basically we found only Uber and Lyft app usage has a statistically significant impact on the number of trips people generate or people take. So this is a statistical model. I will skip this. So basically, at a national level, Uber and the Lyft service may cause people to make more trips than they previously would have if they don't have access to this kind of service. But bike sharing and car sharing does not create additional trips at a national level. Micro mobility, such as bike sharing, might enhance urban mobility. Overall, we found ride-hailing apps usage has a positive relationship between the number of trips that people making, but the bike sharing and the car sharing does not. So what we found from this national study, we found Uber and Lyft create additional trips for the urban residents. So, okay, this is the chapter 3. Let's move to the next chapter, the relationship between shared mobility and the public transit. Specifically, we investigated the relationship between e-scooter and public transit. So this is the data and the research area. Basically, we studied the e-scooter distributions in Austin. At that time, it's 2019, we have 4 different companies, Jung, Lyft, and others operate in the city of Austin. So basically, we investigate how this different scooter company operation will affect the bus ridership in the city of Austin. So we generate a quarter-mile buffer around the different stops, each black dot, a bus stop. Then we generate a quarter-mile buffer around each bus stop, and we measure how many e-scooter trips originated from this buffer and how many e-scooter trips ending at this buffer. So this is how we measure the relationship between bus usage and e-scooter usage. This is basically the data and the variables. We have 1,802 bus stops. I will skip this because we have a lot of content. So this is basically the spatial distribution of different e-scooter trips. You can see most of them are concentrated in the UT area and the downtown area. Not so many trips are generated along these different bus lines or bus buffers. So quickly go to the result parts. So we found if a bus stop located in a weak transit desert area, which means underserved neighborhoods, then there could be a more long trip e-scooter usage compared to this bus stop in a transit desert. So basically what we're saying is if a bus stop located in a relatively okay neighborhood, there could be more e-scooter trips to this bus stop than to the real transit desert. So also, this indicated e-scooter can be alternative transportation mode for this area where existing bus transit system cannot well serve the demand. So basically means if you have a lot of short range transit demand in the neighborhood, e-scooter can serve an alternative transportation mode for the residents. E-scooter can also be a potential solution to solve the first and the last mile problem related to public transportation system. So I will not go into very detail in this part. I'm going to skip this. We suggest a policymaker may consider e-scooter seriously as a possible way to expand the public transit service. There's a lot of complaining about the e-scooter usage. We will talk about this later because we have one chapter designated to this area. So TNC, Transportation Network Company, Uber and Lyft. We have a lot of study going on in this area. We just want to mention one interesting study, how the Uber set out the price search during special events. So we want to know how the Uber changed their price. So basically, this was done in 2016. So we basically have a different Uber service, and we want to know how Uber changed their price. Basically, how the Uber determine how many X you want to charge at a given time and a given location. So we started, 2015, we started to collect the data in 2015, July 4th weekend. So we basically designed an app trying to send out the request for Uber ride. Then we collect the price, then we compare the different price. So this is how we carried out our study. So we collect 46,000 data request collected. And basically, this was from July 3rd to July 6th. So basically, this is when we collect all this different data. So this is a special distribution of this price search functions. So the green means July 3rd, yellow means July 4th, blue is July 5th. And the size of the square means how many times when you send out a Uber request, Uber will search the price. So sometimes you see Uber will charge 6 times your normal price at a given time and a given location. So basically, this is a special distribution of the Uber price search in the city of Austin, and it is detailed descriptive analysis of a different request time and the price search time. So I will not go into talk about the details. So this is basically the regression model. And I will skip this. So basically, what we found? We found Uber adjusted their price search in 2015, at least in 2015, according to your requested time and also according to your requested location. So if you request Uber ride in the middle night, they will significantly increase the price. Also, at that time, if you request a Uber ride in downtown area for same distance, for same time compared to other location in the city, Uber will also post a price search on that request. So during the time limitation, I will skip that. Then we'll talk about the next chapter, the bike and bike sharings. So bike and bike sharing are important shared mobility format. This is the bike sharing in New York. Then we will give you a quick example in Austin. We're trying to understand where do people ride bike. So in order trying to understand where people ride a bike, we have worked with a startup called Strava to collect the people's origin, destination, and their time, trying to understand where exactly people ride bicycle in city of Austin. This is again use a location-based service, so we will know the origin, destination, the routes, and the time of each bike ride. So this is the data we collected in city of Austin. So basically, you can see the red. So you can see most of the bicycle ride are distributed in the west side of the city. The darker the color, the more bike ride happening. So you can see a lot of bike ridership happening along the 360 highway, and also a lot of bike ride happening in the west of the city.
Young Fang, I do want to say that we have about 5 minutes for some additional Q&A.
Oh, okay. I'll just skip this. So, this is how we carry out the biker study. We collaborated with a startup company, and I'll skip this. And this is our sample distribution, and this is let's go to the finding. In general, the actual okay. Let's basically let me quickly skip this part. So I don't think I have enough time to finish all of them. So so the next chapter I talk about e-scooter service. We have studied the e-scooter lot in Urban Information Lab. So we talk about the spatial distribution of e-scooters, and we talk about where people ride e-scooters. We talk about what kind of violation people use scooter when they when they use a scooter, what kind of violation they will run into, and we also examined how different companies solve these different violations. So this is a e-scooter distribution in the city of Austin. So basically, you can see most of them again concentrated in the downtown and UT. So this is basically the information of a different e-scooter usage in different time of the year. So this is the statistic information about a different e-scooter usage. So on average, everybody use e-scooter from 0.8 mile to 1.2 miles. On average, they use e-scooter for 8 minutes. So this is a heat map of where people use e-scooter when they do use it. So basically, you can see from 7 to 7 a.m. To 7 p.m. So this, we will skip this. This is related to the relationship between scooter and the bus. Already talked about that. So let's skip this part. So we will talk about scooter violations. So basically, we hear a lot of complaining about the e-scooter. We're trying to understand what kind of violation happening and how different company respond to different e-scooter violations. So we see different violations like parking, throw away the e-scooters on sidewalk, and so on and so on. So basically, we're trying to understand where the different violation happening and where do they cluster in space. So how do we get the data? We have access to the city's 311 call system. So basically, we collect the data from April to September in 2016. We get 4,100 different violation report related to e-scooter violations. So this is a general distribution of this 4,100 data. You can see most of them are concentrated in the morning weekdays, and there's some of them in the morning weekend. We're basically quickly move this. So this is the distribution of different e-scooter violations. You can see most of them are concentrated in the weekday morning. So what kind of violation happening? First, the dominant one is the parking on the sidewalk. We call sidewalk obstruction. Or the second one is obstruction in general. That's a scooter in the parking lot in the public property. Then the third one is damaged devices. You have a broken e-scooter in your neighborhood or on the road that's called damaged devices. Then we have devices in private property or devices in a park. we have 5 different category of violations. The most dominant one is the sidewalk obstruction. So basically, this is a distribution of different violations and how people report these different violations. Most of them actually report by smartphone apps. 91% report violations through smartphone apps. This is interesting. I will tell you why. This is basically the different violations, but the response time. So you see the response time in hours. If you report a violation in smartphone, it takes 17 hours for the company and for the city to respond to that violation. But if you make a phone call, it only takes 3 hours. The company will immediately respond to your compliance. So next time when you see a violation, just call them. This is true for other violation as well. So which company is not so good? It's bad. So Bird has a lot of violation, 29%, followed by Jump, followed by, Bird had a 29, Lime had a 28, followed by Jump. They are top 3, Bird, Lime, and Jump. Okay, I'll skip this. So which company will respond to their violation quickly? So this is the time, again, in hours. So you can see when you have a violation, Bird take 16 hours to respond to your violation, but Lime take 28 hours to respond to that violation. So they're not very responsible for any compliance. Jump, on the other hand, is very quick. It's taking 11 hours to respond to the violation. So, okay, we don't have time. So basically, this is where the different violation concentrating in space. You can see concentrating along the river and along the downtown. You have if you happen to go through there or visit this area, you can see a lot of violation, at least in 2016, e-scooter violations. And on university campus, on West campus, we have some violation. On Zhou Park, there's a lot of violation. Again, a lot of violation happening downtown. Okay, again, this is a hotspot analysis for e-scooter. We will skip this. And how do we, in general, how do we solve this e-scooter violation problem? How do we solve this shared mobility problem? I think this is a formula. The public and the private and the city and the citizens should work together to solve this problem. So we cannot solve the e-scooter violation or e-scooter problem just rely on one party. The general public, the city, and the researcher should work together to solve this problem. Okay, the findings. We will skip this finding because we already talked about different violations. So I want to conclude my talk. To be or not to be a duckling, this is a good question to ask. So because I don't have time, I'll probably skip the last chapter. So again, this book was supported by CM2, and I want to say thank you so much for the general support. And this book is a collection of all different research projects carried out in Urban Information Lab. And I want to thank my graduate student, Ye Fu and Shunhua, who contribute a lot to a different research topic. And again, I know I skipped a lot of content, so if you're interested, feel free to email me or buy the book. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Young Fang. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry that our Q&A did get cut a little short, and we are over 2 o'clock. But just before, again, we can share the email if people did want to continue with questions. But just to go ahead and close out the afternoon and everybody can move forward with their day, I did want to mention that we have a fall exhibition planned for November 16th. We are having it as a hybrid event, so we will be sharing it on Zoom so our constituent members can join us. And we'll also have an in-person presentation for our UT consortium members. So I will, if you have presentations, if students would like to be presenting their posters, we will be having an awards opportunity for our students to acknowledge their hard work that they've been doing for us. I appreciate so much your time. I know that we have, like I said, any other questions that you'd like to send to Jung Fang, please do so via email. I know I want to read the book because my husband is a cyclist and he has very impassioned opinions about the scooters, as I'm sure everybody has impassioned opinions about the e-scooters. But thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. So great afternoon. Take care. And please join us for our exhibition and an October brown bag. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for attending. Bye.